The sea was calm, deceptively so. For days the wind had slackened. The sails hung heavy, limp against the masts. The horizon shimmered like hot glass, and the crew moved through a haze of heat and salt. The Medusa creaked and moaned, its timbers sun-bleached and warped in the African sun. Then, without warning, the calm betrayed them. With a sickening jolt, the Medusa struck. The force of the grounding buckled the deck. Passengers were thrown from their bunks. Plates crashed from shelves. Crew members stumbled into each other, scrambling to the rails. Some froze in disbelief. Others screamed. Beneath the ship, the sea was still, but the damage was done. It was July 2nd, 1816, and they had run aground on the Banque d'Arguin, just 30 miles off the West African coast. The Medusa was a French frigate assigned to transport colonial administrators, troops, and settlers to Senegal. It was part of the Bourbon monarchy's mission to re-establish control after Napoleon's defeat. The ship carried nearly 400 people, including the new French governor of Senegal, a handful of nobles, officers, crew, and laborers. But the man steering the ship had no business being at sea. Captain Hugues Duroy de Chaumaret had spent years away from naval service, appointed not for skill, but loyalty. He was a relic of the old aristocracy, cautious, proud, and dangerously incompetent. Against the advice of his officers, he hugged the coast too closely, trying to impress his passengers with speed. He ignored soundings, he dismissed warnings, and when the Medusa struck the reef, there was no plan, only chaos. Water surged beneath the hull. The ship listed hard to starboard. The sails flapped uselessly in the breeze. Officers barked orders, but confusion spread faster than discipline. Panic took root. They had lifeboats, but not enough for everyone. So they built a raft. It was a crude, desperate construction, about 66 feet long and 23 wide, cobbled together from masts, spars, and planks, lashed with ropes and covered in barrels to help it float. It had no rudder, no sail, no anchor, no way to steer or stop. It was designed to be towed. At best, it might hold a few dozen men. But when the boats grew overcrowded, 147 people were ordered aboard. Soldiers, sailors, laborers, the expendable. A woman and child boarded briefly, then were pulled off again before launch. The rest were herded onto the wooden platform in the dim light of dawn. There were only a few barrels of wine, no food, no shelter, and no promises. The lifeboats cut their ropes and rowed away. Waves hit the raft within hours. It buckled under the weight. Knees jammed into chests, backs arched in pain. Men screamed, the timbers groaned, water rushed over the sides, salt burned eyes and lips. The wine barrels rolled with the movement, sloshing inside. A storm brewed on the horizon. Then, that night, the killing began. A fight erupted near the edge. Drunken shouts. Someone pulled a dagger. Bodies pitched into the sea. Others jumped, delirious, convinced they saw land. At least 20 men vanished into the black water before sunrise. On the second night, the raft became a battlefield. The stronger men formed a circle near the center. The injured and weak were pushed to the outer edges, where the waves crashed harder. Some were cast off to lighten the load. Others simply disappeared during the night. The survivors later claimed it was for survival, but others would call it a culling. By the fourth day, the raft was a graveyard. The sun peeled the skin from their faces. Blisters cracked and oozed. Men lost the ability to stand. Eyes swelled shut. Tongues split from thirst. Salt sores opened on every limb. And still, the raft drifted. The wine ran low. Madness bloomed. And the dead began to feed the living. At first, it was the obvious. Those who had died in the night. Their limbs were carved in silence, rationed out by those with knives. Flesh was cooked briefly on shards of metal heated in the sun. Later, it was eaten raw. Some men sobbed as they chewed. Others gave thanks. They drank seawater. They drank urine. They fought over scraps of shirt soaked in wine. They licked salt from the wood, from each other. The sun turned the raft into an oven. The nights brought hallucinations and cold. One man claimed he saw his mother on the horizon. Another clutched a corpse, believing it was his child. The strong guarded the center. The weak were left to die on the perimeter. And still, no ship came. Back on shore, the officers of the Medusa said nothing. They told no one about the raft. They assumed it would vanish, dragged under the waves, taking its shame with it. The governor, saved in the first lifeboat, moved on with his mission. Captain Chaumares prepared his defense. The raft drifted for 13 days. Of the 147 men who boarded, only 15 survived to the end. And even then, they were not whole. They were skeletal, sun-blind, blistered beyond recognition. Some would never speak again. Others spent years recounting the nightmare. On July 17th, a French brig named the Argus spotted them. At first, the crew thought it was wreckage until they saw arms waving. They pulled the men aboard one by one. Skin sloughed off in patches. Some were too weak to move. One man kissed the deck, then passed out. Another tried to throw himself overboard, unable to believe it was real. Among the survivors were two men who would change everything: Jean-Baptiste Savigny, the ship's surgeon, and Alexandre Correia, an engineer. Together they wrote down what had happened, every detail: the horror, the abandonment, the cannibalism. Their account was published across France. It ignited a scandal. Captain Chaumares was arrested and court-martialed. He was found guilty of incompetence, but served only 3 years in prison. The rest walked free. The government tried to bury the story, but the public wouldn't let it go. A young painter named Théodore Géricault heard the tale and became obsessed. He interviewed survivors, he visited morgues, he studied drowned bodies. For over a year he painted, recreating the scene in agonizing detail: the moment of rescue, the desperation, the dead, the dying, the tiny sail of the Argus on the far horizon. His masterpiece, The Raft of the Medusa, was unveiled in 1819. It stunned Paris. The canvas was massive, raw, unforgiving. It didn't shy away from suffering. It demanded that the viewer confront it. And through it, the raft became something more than a disaster. It became a symbol of corruption, of empire gone rotten, of class and cowardice. The men on the raft had been abandoned by their leaders, forgotten by their nation, and remembered only by their pain. No names were etched in stone. No monument rose. Most of the dead were never identified. Convicts, conscripts, men without legacy. The raft itself disappeared, swallowed by the sea or broken apart by time. What remains is their story. A story not just of tragedy, but of betrayal. A reminder that the worst horrors often don't come from nature, but from the systems meant to protect us. And the moment they fail, we are left to drift. Thank you for listening to The Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.